the freight forwarder, along with the special carrier, should be more active towards the shipper. On the other hand, the shipper should be much more open, should be more focused on quality and not only on money.
Welcome to another episode of Project Cargo Professionals, powered by Varimar. This week, we're back in Basel, Switzerland, with a true veteran of the project logistics world, Sandro Lepori, now at Fracht and formerly Director of Logistics at ABB and Alstom. Sandro isn't one to shout about his achievements, but his track record says it all. He reflects on a long and distinguished career, the importance of respecting your people, and has a clear message for the industry. You underestimated us. We're here with Sandro Lepori, winner of the HLPFI Lifetime Achievement Award. Tell us what you did to deserve that, Sandro.
Well, you guys have to tell me why I got it. I'm having difficulties, accepting this. No, the thing is, all my life, let's say starting in 1969 up to today, I have been always involved in logistical tasks, first as a shipper, up to mid 2013, and then I changed and I went to the other side, to the forwarder side, but always involved in project cargo, particularly in power generation.
And how did you get into the freight business, logistics business in the first place? You were born in Switzerland, right?
Well, I was born in Bern, and my father was an employee of the state, and he had some connection with, or he knew Bramboveri people, and he thought, why don't you go to Bramboveri in Baden? And this is how the whole thing started.
That was your first job?
That was my first job, yes.
And what were you doing?
Well, I wanted to go into the finance department, but I think at that time they didn't have any necessity, so they put me in the logistics department, and that's where I stayed, where I started, and I'm still there.
And then at some point you went to New Jersey?
Right. In 69, let's say a year after I joined Bramboveri, I went to North Brunswick, New Jersey, where Bramboveri had a rather big company. And that was the time when Bramboveri sold and installed 1,300 megawatt steam turbines, the biggest one at that time. And I stayed there until end of 76.
Tell us, what was Bramboveri?
Well, a big Swiss company, a very important big Swiss company, particularly in power generation, but not only in power generation.
And after that?
Okay, so when I returned, I still was Bramboveri, and then in 1988, Bramboveri joined forces with ASEA of Sweden and created ABB. And I then joined again the power generation part, in other words, ABB power generation.
And then you spent the rest of your career working in Switzerland?
Yes, I had some interruption. 85, I went to Mexico for 5 months to help logistics tasks. At that time, also Bramboveri in Mexico City. And I also, for a half a year, I worked for a trading company that belonged to Bramboveri in Zurich. That was in 1988.
And at what point did you get mixed up with Fracht, where you're now employed?
Well, I started to know Fracht in 1977.
So you were dealing with Mr. Reisdorf Sr.?
Absolutely, and it was a fantastic time. But okay, we did not only have Fracht, we had other freight forwarders, but Fracht was one of the most exciting freight forwarders that I heard. So the relationship was very intensive and very interesting. And that's why they offered me something then in 2013. And I said, yeah, I want to know the other part of it, I don't want to be always a shipper. I want to know how a freight forwarder, deals and acts and things like that, yeah.
So who was easier to deal with, Reisdorf Senior or Junior?
Two different type of persons, I would say. Senior, he was the person that founded Fracht in 1955. And Junior is different. He's the consolidator. He has a look for the future of the company. And when he took over in 2001 or 2002, I forgot now exactly, I mean, then the company started to really grow on a worldwide scale.
And you've seen a lot from a shipper's perspective. What mistakes do companies make in supply chain management?
Well, I see that there is a big lack of know-how. At our time, it was more evolved than today. Of course, the task is then being transported over to the carriers and obviously to the freight forwarders. That is one issue in logistics, and not only in moving the equipment, but the technical part, particularly the packing, the consolidation, but also the insurance coverage is also a big part, or how you finance certain aspects that is lacking, in my opinion.
So, what are the important qualities that make a great logistics professional?
Well, I think what is important, as I said before, you have the commercial part of it, and you should start logistics during the offer phase. Then you go over to the execution phase, and here the execution is not only a commercial part of it, where you need to send the offers out, evaluate the offers, the contracts with the freight forwarder or with the carriers. But as I said, you need to have intensive discussion with the technical part of it, and the advantage if you have engineers in your own department, that is of great advantage, because then they are able to talk to the project engineer, and also they are able to talk to the carriers, to the special carriers moving heavy equipment, whether it is by sea, road, rail, or even air. The other part is the analysis of the executed project. That was also a very big part at my time, because then you feed back the pros and the cons of the executed projects.
One of the most memorable logistics projects you've been involved with? What springs to mind?
Well, there are many, I have to say. Okay, in the 70s, Afghanistan, we had gas turbines transported to Afghanistan before, it was in 1978, before the Iran revolution. We transported the gas turbines by rail from Switzerland up to Mashhad, eastern Iran, and then from there we went by road up to Kabul.
But at that time, Afghanistan was reasonably open and liberal, wasn't it? I remember people from the UK used to go on holiday to Afghanistan.
Right, because I mean, UK, was the last country that was involved in Afghanistan before the Russians came. It was in the 70s. In the 80s, we had some interesting hydro project in Turkey. One I executed with Panalpina, who doesn't exist anymore, and the second one was with Fracht. And then in the 90s, okay, we had huge and many gas and combi cycle power plants in North Africa, particularly in Libya, but not only there. We had it obviously also in Saudi. And then in the 90s, we started also the combi cycle power plants in the US.
So you traveled to all of these countries running these projects?
Yeah. Traveling was an important factor, and I traveled most of the time together with our engineers, never alone.
And the most unusual or difficult item?
Well, turbines. Turbines was the most difficult. I would say the most challenging was certainly the project that we executed in Libya. Okay, we had also some difficult projects in Peru, in the Amazon part of Peru, We had interesting projects also in Argentina and obviously also in Brazil, in Mexico. And if I go to the other continent, Southeast Asia was very big. Not so much China, not so much China. We had also difficult project in Australia. India also came mid 2005, 2006. That was also very interesting. Even Moscow we had a combi cycle power plant in Moscow before that was about 2006, 2007. And all this project, including the traveling, was very exciting. It was not only the transport, but the people that you met, how you talked to the people, how you had to adapt to the people, and that was the interesting part of my profession at that time. Yeah.
We're thrilled that the first series of Project Cargo Professionals is exclusively sponsored by Varimar Shipping. Founded in 2009 by shipping serial inventor Alexander Varvarenko, Varimar specializes in bulk, breakbulk, heavy lift, and oversized shipments, and is a trusted carrier to and from Europe, the Middle East, Asia, and Africa. At Varimar, massive structures like wind turbines or entire factories are a day-to-day business, and as a semi-liner carrier, they can offer tailor-made solutions, calling wherever and whenever you need them to. With offices in 13 countries, including recent openings in Asia, they're bridging the East-West gap. A multilingual team fluent in languages from English and German to Arabic and Chinese means communication is seamless. Visit varimar.com to find out more and ask them about their new regular service connecting the Middle East, India, Indonesia, and Australia. Visit varimar.com. Now back to the show. I wanted to ask you about people, actually. Well, I know you've got contacts, a lot of friends around the world. Who are some of the most memorable people from the industry?
I had very good contacts with heavy lift carriers. Jumbo, as an example. Road carriers, road heavy lift carriers. Not so much on the client part of it, because you hardly had contact with the client. We had more contact with, let's say, the internal engineers, the site people. The interface towards the client was rather small. And obviously, my biggest help was an engineer. He and we started in 1977, and up to his, let's say, death, we were always together, and we solved all the technical and commercial part together.
Any other individuals that you're still in touch with, still friends now?
Yeah, I still have contacts, Siemens part or the still existing part of General Electric. And I still have friends that retired where I still have contact with them, particularly up in Sweden. We still go on vacation together at least once a year. Yeah, I have a lot of contacts.
What was the idea behind the ABB Alstom Global Logistics Council?
Yeah, that was an important task. The goal was to unite the logistics part of ASEAN and unite the logistics part of Brahmoveri at that time, thus having, let's say, a strong team within the ABB organization, even though ABB was split up in various companies. But we of ABB Power Generation, we really had strong connections to Sweden, to Finland, to Norway, to Italy, to Germany. These were, let's say, the countries that formed the logistics part of ABB at that time.
And there's obviously a new generation now coming through. What would you say is the biggest misconception that young professionals have about logistics? And what would your advice be to somebody starting out now?
First of all, you need to be enthusiastic about your job, and don't be afraid in asking within your company help. But you also have to inform the people, inform the engineers, inform the economical part of the project continuously. And this is a little bit lacking today, the task of informing people, not only in writing, but also verbally. Another thing is trust in people. And particularly, in my opinion, one of the most important things is be humble. Be humble internally, but also be humble externally.
And you're still dealing with shippers, customers now. What could shippers do to make their own projects run smoother? What mistakes do shippers make today?
I don't have that much of a contact to shippers today, but whenever I have the opportunity to talk to them, I try to convey the message, get excited about your job, provide a culture within your department that can be, and that is being accepted also internally of the shippers organization. And just to tell you a story, about 5 or 6 years ago, when I was already at Fracht, I still meet engineers of Alstom, even people, that headed not only the departments here in Switzerland, but headed also departments outside Switzerland, particularly in Southeast Asia. And I was talking to the guy, he was my age, and I said, if I look back, one big problem was you underestimated us. His answer was, you're absolutely right. And that aspect still exists today.
Who's underestimating who?
Let's say, the department of the shippers, whether it's an economical department or an engineering department or a procurement department, underestimates the task that the logistics part has to do.
And you're dealing with shipping lines, other freight forwarders, service providers. What's service like today compared to what it used to be?
What I hear still from France is the freight forwarder, along with the special carrier, should be more active towards the shipper. On the other hand, the shipper should be much more open, should be more focused on quality and not only on money.
Is that a problem?
That is a big problem. In my opinion.
Never heard that story before.
No, but it has been accentuated much more than it was 10 or 15 years ago.
What did you love so much about the business? Or what do you? You're still in it.
Well, I mean, I'm the guy who likes to go outside the office, see, the movement, see the type of carriage that is necessary to move a big piece from A to B, to get in contact, obviously, also with the authorities, could be customs authorities, etc. And then, of course, the knowledge of the cultures and the languages. And that for me was very exciting, because speaking only English would have not been sufficient. So once in a while, I'm glad to speak also French and maybe a little bit of Italian and Spanish.
And how did you manage stress and pressure? What were your hobbies over the years? I heard you're a good golfer.
I used to be a good golfer. No, I played a lot of sports: tennis, soccer, skiing, as a Swiss, obviously. Golf, I only started in the year 2000, but jogging, running, all these types of sports, yes.
And bring us up to date now. What are you doing today with Fracht?
Well, there are two aspects. They asked me to join conversation with shippers, particularly in power generation, and perhaps once in a while I'm able to connect certain thoughts or to explain to the freight forwarder the way the shipper thinks, why a shipper asks this type of question, or why his attitude is this way, or why doesn't he comprehend really the attitude of the freight forwarder or of the carrier. This is basically my role.
And what will you miss when you do stop?
Jeez, I don't know. I hope I can continue 1 or 2 years, and then obviously I have to stop. But what is interesting, is the daily confrontation with the issues, the daily confrontation or the daily possibility to talk to the people that I know, and keeps my brain, I guess, a little bit vivid.
And to finish, we've got a question from Augustine, who is in the United States from Mitsubishi Power Americas. He's responsible for young people, for people in logistics. So he wants to know, what are the biggest mistakes that leaders make when they're developing talent in this business? And also, how does he identify future leaders before they can even see it in themselves?
Well, first of all, when you have young people, you need patience. They need time. You cannot do it in 1 or 2 years. You need more time to really understand logistics tasks. Take the young people along in the meeting with you, even when you travel. Give the young people a chance, let's say, to go 1 year or 2 years to a freight forwarder, and then come back. This is very important. They have to learn the logistics world, which is not in the office, but is outside the office. How does the person solve problems? Is he correct also towards people? Is he fair? As I said before, is he humble enough?
So you're talking a lot about personal skills.
Yes.
You place a lot of importance on that.
Absolutely. Yeah, because you alone, you're nothing. You need a team to do it. And what is important to be a leader is the way you behave towards your personnel. That is, in my opinion, the key.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Project Cargo Professionals, powered by Varamar. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to follow or subscribe so you never miss an episode. Got feedback, a guest suggestion, or a story worth telling? Don't hesitate to reach out. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, let's keep in touch. Follow me, Luke King, on LinkedIn, and explore more at projectcargopros.com.